Live from New York, it's Happy Arduino Day.
It's Ask a Massimo Day.
Happy Arduino Day.
Hey,
Thank
happy
you.
Arduino Day.
Happy Arduino Day, everybody.
This
I
is
got a little card, it's blue, and it's like got a cutout.
this is a special Ask an Engineer. So we started doing Ask an Engineer on Wednesdays, but today happened to be a very historic day. It's the 10-year anniversary of Arduino.
Yeah.
What happened exactly 10 years ago?
And with us, well, I should introduce Massimo. So
Oh
with
yeah,
us,
who is this guy?
With us is
this guy?
is the co-founder and CEO of Massimo, and I've said this before. I'll say it again. I think one of the most creative people in electronics and art in the world that's brought something like Arduino to so many people. So first off, thank you, Massimo, for being here.
If it wasn't for this man, you would all be using basic stamps. So please,
Or
a
pics.
round of
Yeah.
applause for Massimo.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
So today is Arduino Day, and
Okay.
Massimo, what is Arduino Day?
Well, the idea was that there are all these amazing communities of people using Arduino around the world. And so in a way, I thought we need an excuse for them to get together. So let's give an excuse for them to meet up somewhere and kind of know each other and present what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So we have done as an experiment back in Torino a couple of times this Arduino camp. And I thought, okay, why don't we do it global? But we do it in a little bit like, I don't know, in Italy we have this thing called Linux Day, where in October, the same day all over.
Oh no, you install Linux. Everybody takes their PCs and install
Yeah,
Linux.
but they
right?
also do like mini conferences.
Yeah.
And it's a completely.
If it's a day that you have to install Linux, that's like every week for me.
So in a way, the idea was let's organize an event which is actually organized by the community. So we picked the day, created like a little website to make a map of all the events, and provided a template of how the event could be and some graphics they could download. And then we said,
Speaking of?
let us know.
Yeah.
And then we ended up with a few hundreds of these events. It's like 120
Well, there's South
events.
Africa, there's
Yeah.
India, there's
Yeah.
China and Japan.
Yeah, 23
Brazil.
events only in
Pardon
India.
me.
Is that one of
That's
the?
so cool.
I'm going to skip around because I have a lot of questions. So,
Yeah.
is India one of the new markets where you're just seeing a lot of people doing physical computing and Arduino?
So actually, India is a very interesting and very active market. At the moment, they're mostly using either sort of locally made clones or sort of the usual Chinese sort of lookalikes, let's call it like this. But we have a small office in Bangalore, which it's in a way trying to educate people to what it means to use an official sort of Arduino board. So it's an interesting market. It's used a lot in education. We see it. There's like locally made Arduino clones that are used a lot in education. So I think
That's
it's
cool.
a very promising market.
Okay.
It's like street food, like street Arduino. I just imagine them in the streets, just like making one at a time.
So,
little kids.
for Arduino Day, I wanted to let everybody know that we have a code for the Adafruit store. It's 10% off. The code is Arduino Day. You can use it up until midnight, get some Arduino stuff. So we usually do that for Ask an Engineer, but I put that in the chat as well. So some of the events, this is from the website. A worldwide event bringing together Arduino people and projects, share the experience. And then these are some of the things that happened today. There was Arduino Day Roma, there was an Arduino Day at ITP and IDEO. So you were at ITP today, right?
Yes, so last night we had a small preview at IDEO with like 4 makers talking about projects they did. And then today we had a bigger one at ITP with demos, a tiny workshop for beginners and a showcase of different projects. It was very nice.
Okay.
And so I want to start with some Arduino past.
Right.
Because we talked about ITP.
Yeah.
And ITP has its, I guess, some of it, Arduino roots there.
Yep.
So I have a photo. This is from 2010. This is some of the folks from the Arduino team. They were at our old AD Nassau, our Adafruit in the financial district.
Yeah.
And so I also have.
Wait, hold on. Who are these people?
And I also have, I think, the only signed copy of all the Arduino team members.
Yeah.
I had this with me, and I had everyone sign. This is like my baseball card. I don't know anything about sports, so I still have that. But can you talk about like how it got started? Because you're 5 people basically around the world.
Yeah.
But how did the Arduino get started?
Plus the secret 6th Arduino. Can I call you
like
Arduiners?
like the Beatles or something
Yeah,
like that.
there's the mystical 6th.
So how did it
Arduino.
start out? How was ITP involved, and how did this all come together?
Well, it started off because 12 years ago, I started teaching in this interaction design school that used to be in the northwest of Italy, in Ivrea, which is the city where the Olivetti company used to be. So in a way, for the sort of Italian tech industry, it's an important place because they used to do a lot of electronics manufacturing, and they still do. I mean, you visited some of the factories.
Yeah,
back
we
in
did go to the
days.
factory.
And so we were teaching interaction design. So the issue was really how do you get designers, artists to the point that they can build things with electronics. So we did a number of experiments. At the beginning, I was using basic stamps, and then I, back then. In 2002, you would you have to invent a little bit the curriculums and the tools. So I saw that Tom Igo at the ITP was actually the teacher that was publishing almost every single thing about his class. So you would get syllabi, lectures.
That was very rare back then. Now
Yeah.
it's standard, but this is over 10 years ago.
No, that was completely.
Were you all wearing leather jackets? Because I want to imagine you guys like super punk and like tattoos.
Well,
and, like,
this idea of open source was still new,
Yeah.
and this idea that there was open curriculum. So
Yeah.
that goes hand in hand, right? I mean, those
Yeah.
things. So that's how you
The
found him.
Arduino is the tutorials.
So in a way, that was the time when, during those years, is the time when, obviously, I found Tom. So I used his website to understand, the difference between the way I was teaching and the way he was teaching, and so I developed my style by kind of combining this. And then obviously I was following Limor, and when you were publishing all the circuits, so I learned a lot of things.
I was totally publishing circuits. I don't remember.
Well, it's funny that I think if you look back at the history of open source hardware and the history of Arduino, when people ask about open source hardware, I always say, basically it was Arduino. That's what kind of put it on the map. Bunny was doing some things, Limor was doing some things, but that was the first time, I think, when Arduino said, this is open source hardware. And it all went hand in hand, because you saw Limor was doing stuff, Tom was publishing things. And you wouldn't have been able to know about them unless they put this stuff on the internet.
Totally.
Yeah.
So obviously, I was coming from the fact that I have been using Linux for quite a long time, so I was familiar with the benefits of open source. And then obviously, a number of things that end up in the very first Arduino boards I borrowed from Limor. So the first Arduino with USB interface, I totally copied the circuit.
I have a photo.
Okay.
I'm glad you copied that circuit from me and not from other people, because I actually had a working circuit. No.
So that's an even earlier part.
This is a parallel
So
port.
this is a prototype from 2004, and this is a I had made a couple of platforms before this one. They were based
This is
on
like parallel port programming
yeah,
style.
parallel port and an LED kind of sticking there, but it was blinking, and I was able to program it. So that
Yeah.
was like the first.
The first mini pub also used a parallel port. This was when computers, like, you could actually get a computer with a parallel port. It wasn't that rare.
Yeah, because
Now it's,
in
super rare.
school we had in the lab a bunch of these compact PCs, desktops with Windows. So Basic Stamp was working very well. We had Basic X24 that were failing all the time. It was a nightmare.
Yeah.
So I started to use PICs because they were easily available. Because back in those days, people were using PICs to hack satellite TVs so they could
right.
watch the football without paying.
I learned microcontrollers. The first microcontroller program I did was to make a PIC to hack the PlayStation, original PlayStation. You can make these boot chips.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm going to learn microcontroller programming, and that's how I started.
Yeah.
I was
found.
selling them for like $10 each too. It's probably a bad scene. I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah, I was going to this thing, which is like a weird thing that they have in all over Italy. Every weekend there's like one of these radio amateur fairs.
Yeah.
So it's like radio amateurs meet up and they sell chips and electronics. So I was buying this big stuff, but it was really complicated.
It's
So
like
I
a swap
switched.
fest.
I switched to AVRs because
Yeah.
one of my mentors told me these AVRs are sort of easier to program.
Yeah.
And there's a good open source compiler for it. And then one of my students started to apply some of the, came up with wiring, which was a thesis project we did with me and K-Series from processing,
Yeah.
where the
Also open source. So all these things
Yeah.
keep kind of
Yeah,
overlapping. Yeah.
It's interesting
Yeah, and
that
also
wiring and processing are so core now to anybody who does interactive art or interactive design.
Yeah.
They will use processing or Cinder or Arduino / wiring.
In our case, we were using processing to teach students how to program. And it's really a pain to switch from processing to something like BASIC because you have to start from
Yeah.
scratch. So the idea was really, let's build processing for hardware. And then sort of wiring did kind of the first job at kind of looking at how that could be done. And then we decided that we wanted to have something which would be completely open source.
Yeah.
And so we kind of re-implemented wiring into Arduino. And then we started to pull in people from different parts of so this David Quartet is one of the founders,
Yeah.
was there as
Let's look at a photo of this guy.
the guy with the big beard.
Wait,
Okay.
they all have big beards.
Yeah.
Which one is
So
David Quartet?
the second
Gray
one from the
sweatshirt.
right.
Yeah.
The second one from the right.
Gray sweatshirt. guy.
Okay, so that's David.
David.
Okay,
So
Cortez.
So David Quartier was actually in Ivrea as like a visiting researcher. So we realized we had similar issues with our students. So he started to work on it with me. Then David Mellis was a student at Ivrea at that time, so he helped us re-implement the whole source code completely as open source. Then there was another student, Nicolas Zambetti, that was involved at the beginning that helped us also.
That's the secret.
The 6 Arduino.
Arduino. No, it's just funny because his name was on some of the boards and people were like, "Who is this guy?" Like
They're very early boards, yeah.
they buried him in the desert.
No, they're not.
Where is he now?
I know that he had been working for Apple in the last few years.
Oh, wow.
So this means, I guess, he cannot appear anywhere.
Apple Arduino coming soon.
But, you
Well,
know,
actually, years ago, Apple had a job.
they had a job.
Arduino,
I
yeah.
remember I posted up on that on
Yeah.
Make. They were looking for someone to do like Arduino compatible. I guess that they were maybe thinking of some type of.
It was a job
toolkit.
offer for a designer, and they asked for processing and Arduino knowledge.
Yeah.
Because when you prototype,
Yeah.
people use Arduino.
Yeah, I can say this as a company. I can't say what they're buying, but Apple buys lots of.
They buy a lot of stuff
They
from
buy
us
they buy a
too.
lot of stuff from us.
All right.
And
Not to go into phones, but clearly for like stuff
probably
in the
testing
office,
equipment or something
testing,
like that.
or
And it's-
just their board or
yeah.
like something for the cafeteria.
and I don't ship the orders myself anymore, but when I used to, when I look at it, I'm like, wow, this is pretty neat. Apple's buying all this cool stuff. And I think that the thing that I've seen in the industry, and I'll get back to the origins of Arduino, is I saw the switch when I was at Make from the professional engineers who only had these big expensive dev boards. And after the Arduino came out, they all started to use the Arduino and lots of breakout boards and lots of sensors because it was so much easier. And you didn't set out to
I don't
compete with the dev board company.
I don't even know how
but
you
that's
can
what
attach
happened.
sensors to an STK 500.
Yeah.
I mean, that just sounds like such a nightmare.
But right
Like
now,
there's IDC cables and you plug into those. Like, how would you do it?
but right now you travel around the world. You probably see this. Professional engineers at big companies, they use Arduino for everything.
Yeah.
It's the glue. They want to get sensor data. They want to do this, and it's the thing that it's fast. There's documentation, and all the accessories that you want to have are available.
Yeah.
But that's not what you set out to do. You didn't.
No,
You didn't
because I didn't care about that market.
Yeah.
Our objective was to make something for students that would be simple, that would be smallish, that you could fit into a project.
Yeah.
Also, the issue was that when I was teaching, we were using basic stamps, and the basic stamp wasn't that expensive in the US. But once you import it into Europe,
Yeah.
the importer was of a tiny company, so they charged like 100% markup. So in the end, it was $100.
Wow.
And obviously, if you have a board that costs $100, what happens is that students they don't make projects, or they make one and then.
And then they're like, yeah, no, it's like, don't touch it.
Also, I remember David told me that in the university in Malmo where he was teaching, back in those days, they had something like 6 basic stamps. They would bring them out, use them with the students, then put them back in the box, and lock them
Yeah.
up. That was it. There was no, and that's not what we wanted. Also, people to be able to build their own Arduino. So once I got the first core of people kind of working on together, and so the things started to take shape. I think one of the things we added was we started to look at shields. So the idea that you could pile up things. So I think the inspiration there was partially this industrial standard called PC 104.
Which
where
totally
you
sucked.
Totally sucks, but this idea that you could pile up the different boards.
Yeah.
If you're under 35, you will not remember this thing. This was horrible. I had PC 104 boards, and they were expensive, and the pins would bend so easily. and
Totally.
it's crazy.
But the idea was that I remember that when I was leading the history of the Apple II,
Yeah.
the fact that he had these slots that you could plug things
Cards.
in.
PCI, yeah.
80 character card.
Yeah, so
characters.
in a way, this idea that it should be expandable. So we started to make the first shields for wiring, and then we ported that concept to Arduino. So that was one of the pieces, and then we thought, we need to expand our reach. We need to involve more people in the project.
Yeah.
And since I met Tom Igo
Yeah.
years before, I thought, I really need to bring Tom and show him. So we had the chance to work together on a project, which was like for a lighting company, an Italian design company.
Okay.
So that we made a bunch of concepts for them as the school where I was teaching. So I invited Tom to help in that.
So you did a project together.
Yeah. And so since we were using the first early Arduinos, because this was the summer of 2005.
Was it called Arduino yet?
Yeah, so the reason why we consider the birthday of Arduino like around this time is because it's when we picked the name.
Okay. And how did I know the name is an Italian king, right? That's the.
Yeah.
But how did you come how did you come up with the name? And was there any other names that you were considering?
Well, actually, what happens is that at the beginning, for simplicity, it wasn't. At the very, very beginning, it was called Programma 2004 because
Programmer 2004.
Programma 2004.
Oh, Programma 2004.
Which in Italian means program. Well, not to go back into time, but
Yeah.
in
Sounds like how Microsoft would name something. Windows 2004.
well, the reason is because in 1962, Olivetti came up with the first desktop computer that you could buy for less than $10,000, and it was called Programma 101, and it was a genius invention. With only 7,000 transistors, they were doing crazy things.
Huh.
And in the best Italian tradition, they said, okay, that's enough, you can stop doing this. So they made a lot of money by basically selling the patents to HP. So this was like an iconic piece of hardware from the day. So my first project was called Programma 2003.
Oh, okay.
And then I made from 2004, which was supposed to be like the follow-up.
Yeah.
And the picture you saw of like the parallel port and everything says
Yeah.
Programma 2004 on it. So
Okay, yeah. So this is. I don't think I've ever heard this story before. This is the
it's-
first time.
Yeah, this is
This
exclusive
is it.
on.
This is exclusive.
exclusive. So Arduino could have been called Programma 2004, but then you decided
Well, then at
not
some
so
point
catchy.
it was
Well, they
called.
did call it Joy Millenove, so it's not like they didn't.
Well, also because later on I started calling it wiring mini because this idea that you could make it.
Wiring Mini. Okay.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
small. But then I said, okay, since we are re-implementing everything from scratch and we're doing a different project here,
Yeah.
the only thing we kept was the name of the functions. That's it.
Okay.
And so we started to debate. The shape of the board, for example, it's totally David Quartier's picked it up.
Okay.
And so instead of being rectangular, it started to have this funny shape that has only the function of being recognizable as Arduino.
Oh, really? So the reason of that shape was just because you didn't want to have a square board. You wanted to have something.
We said we need to have something that when you look at it, you say this is an Arduino because
Oh,
it's
wow,
got that
okay.
shape.
That's
And well, that's why you are in the design school. You start to think about these things.
so you can. It's
Nice work,
interesting.
designers.
It's
I
interesting.
like it because it's the only board that's not, it's not square.
You can clearly tell that this was developed not by engineers for engineers.
No.
Wasn't. This was
No.
designed for educators.
So I'm
and
a
artists.
failed engineer, meaning that I attended the first 2 years of engineering school in Italy, and then I was bored out of my mind,
And so
and I left.
that's interesting. I didn't realize that the unique shape of the board was because one of the team members said, let's have something that's recognizable and different.
Totally.
So that's
Also, the blue color comes from us wanting to have a color which is not green.
Yeah.
So when you look at it, you can easily recognize
Yeah.
that this is an Arduino.
so the unique shape, green, and then you had this
Blue.
the shield. The blue, and then you had the shields,
Yeah.
and that was the other thing.
So yeah, well, then I obviously screwed up because once David made the first layout, I was adjusting the PCB before we send it to production, and inadvertently I moved one of the connectors by I think like 5 mils or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
So and then I that was like off grid.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize it.
And then too late.
Too late. Well, what happened is that then we had to make a number of these PCBs because David was going to take them back to Sweden and do the first workshops with students at the end of March 2005.
Okay.
So we had to do it. So we were sitting there. It was sort of like the 20th of March, 20-something of March. We were sitting there, and so we had the PCB factory on the phone and said, you need to send it to me by 12 if you want it next week in order to ship it to Sweden.
Yeah.
So I was like, David, what the hell do we do? So we had like Eagle open on the computer, like the phone there, like, with the guy go like, send me the file.
Yeah.
So
Check your
I was
mail.
like-
Check your mail.
So I was like,
I read later though that the things that most people consider failures of technology is what is most charming about technology. Because when you think about like what do people really like about record players, it's that hiss and that click and the skipping. It's like
Well-
it's what makes it charming.
I'll say this about the Shield because I was at Make for a very long time. I work with Lamore now, and had you put it on grid, there'd be a lot of people who would put it in backwards. If it was perfectly square, it would put it in backwards. There's only one way to put in a Shield, and I think it's a good feature. And now it's 10 years later, so it's not changing.
yeah, well,
But I like the idea that it can only go, in one way,
Yeah.
and still work. Because for us as suppliers, one of the problems that you have if something can go either way,
Yeah.
and damage, it will.
Yeah.
And so I think it maybe if you could go back in time, you'd change it. But I think that was a
No,
good.
I think it's charming,
I think
though.
that's a good feature, especially since you made this for people who maybe this is the first time they've ever done electronics. So
Yeah.
who knows?
in a way, it turned out to be useful in
Yeah.
the end. So we were sitting in front of the computer, so I said, okay, David, let's do this. Let's call it Arduino, like this bar we go to get drinks.
Oh, so it's a
And
bar, not just the Italian.
No, it's the bar.
And the bar
This
was
is a
named.
very stressful day 10 years ago.
The bar was named after the Italian king, and there's also an Arduino like espresso machine, right? Isn't there?
Yeah, that's the
another?
Victoria Arduino. It's like the direct descendant of the very first espresso machine ever made. And it's a very iconic machine which has like this big eagle on top of it. And
Yeah.
So those are the, but in Ivrea itself, since this King Arduino was from Ivrea,
Yeah.
you have the Arduino Street, the Arduino Square, the Arduino Bar, the Arduino Crane Company. And then, Ivrea has this crazy tradition that at Carnival, everybody dress up in medieval clothing and they have these battles using these oranges. They throw at each other oranges, these Sicilian oranges that are like blood red inside. So it looks like, blood all over the place. And they are reenacting this thing that happened in the Middle Ages.
And
So
is it called Arduino too?
there's a couple of teams there that are called Arduino.
I hope
so,
that after they do all this, they sit down and they learn Arduino programming.
so you see this cart with like medieval people on it, like really angry, that says the followers are King Arduino on it. And then there is this, it's called the Arduini, it's another team. So it's Arduino everywhere. So, but mostly it's the bar because I was going there to drink Campari.
And
Because
that's,
there's somebody from Milan moving to Ivrea, then
Yeah,
the
yeah,
thing
yeah.
you miss is like, where's my Campari drink?
Yeah.
And so that place was supplying Campari.
So that's the story of the Arduino name. Has anyone ever asked you about? Hey, is all of this stuff named after the microcontroller now, or the Arduino platform? Is that why they have the festival in the street?
Go to Ivrea and they're like, these
No.
are the big
Do they
fans
think
of
it's named
Massimo.
after the?
No, luckily
yet?
not yet.
Not yet?
Not yet. And I think maybe the one day it's going to happen. Once I heard that Paul McCartney was in a bar somewhere in the US, and he heard two teenagers saying, "Wow, do you know that Paul McCartney was in another band before the Wings?" Which would be the Beatles.
Yeah.
So, you know,
That's
I guess
funny.
that as generations change,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
stories we get a little bit. But anyway.
Okay, so that's the name and the people. So tell me about some of the other team members. So we
So
got
there's
Tom
the-
Igo, and we got,
Okay, starting from the
Cortelius.
left, there's Tom Igo.
and then there's you,
There's
Massimo.
you.
And then tell us about Gianluca. 'Cause
So
Gian-
now is when Gianluca comes into play.
Okay.
Because within the school, we did a lot of electronics, to the point that at some point, a teacher that was teaching like visual design got really angry in a faculty meeting saying, the students want to do electronics all the time, they don't want to
Yeah.
do graphics. Well, you know, I'm sorry. But in a way, it was 10 years before it was cool to do hardware startups, and my
Yeah.
students were into making devices again. And so Gianluca is an engineer who comes from the area around Ivrea. Actually, he's from Ivrea. And so he was in contact with all these factory making things. So when I started I was looking for a company to make PCBs.
Yeah.
I found a company that was able to make PCBs. So they were able to make PCBs, but whenever we wanted some consulting done, they were kind of a bit flaky. But then there was this Gianluca guy that was in a corner, you know, not speaking very much. That every time he opened his mouth, he said something reasonable and obvious,
Yeah.
and would make everything work.
I've hung out with Gianluca. And
That's totally Gianluca.
And he's very quiet, but when he says something, it's always right.
Yeah.
And it's very short, and
Yeah.
then it's like perfect. He's
Yeah.
like a fixie bike.
Yeah, he applies the compression algorithm, so
Yeah.
he only kind of speaks when there's something meaningful
Yeah.
to say. And so the idea was that, you know, this guy was like smart and very hands-on, and so we started to work with him directly. And so when we started making the first Arduinos, after we made the PCB by going to the factory directly, I asked Gianluca, could you like get together like 200 pre-manufactured pieces of Arduino?
Yeah.
Because we were gonna sell 50. We made 200, and we sell 50 to the school in Ivrea and 50 to the university in Malmo.
Okay.
And they said the other 100 we will probably sell it to people. I don't know, maybe. I hope we can get rid of them at some
Yeah.
point. And then
Not bad.
yeah.
Not bad first run.
So,
Not bad.
so
Yeah.
those boards are actually, you know, there's still some of them around. I
Yeah.
still have a few of them. So, and that was like the first time we actually had them manufactured as
Yeah.
but you can see that the design of the board is still mine because the tracks look horrible. And then
And what was the name of that? Was there a name for this board, or was it just the Arduino?
we used to call it Arduino Extreme, but I'm
Yeah.
Arduino Extreme.
incredibly
Extreme.
ashamed of that.
No, it's great. I should have
Because in a way, this idea that you would just buy it
Extreme.
and plug it in is
Yeah.
just extreme.
I think maybe 10 years ago there was a trend to call things extreme, like
In a way,
like
yeah.
every type of electronics. Like sometimes we do like pro now, you put pro in front of it, it means something. But extreme is like
Micro or nano.
yeah,
Apple
turbo,
does a
turbo,
turbo.
Arduino turbo maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, so
when we-
Gianluca started to actually make the Arduinos.
Yeah, so he was basically interfacing with all the little manufacturers in Ivrea to actually get the whole thing assembled and made. And so slowly we kind of grew together. So he took care of the manufacturing. And so he kind of, you know, we made 200, and then we make, I think the next batch was 2,000
Wow.
boards. And then slowly, well, you know, this was September 2005. And then, you know, Tom brought back some Arduinos to ITP, and he was planning to kind of show it to some students like the following semester. But I think some of the students saw the whole thing and jumped on it and said they wanted it.
Yeah.
So we had to figure out how to sell these boards to the NYU store,
Yeah.
which, you know, is all these things that when you start a hardware company, you don't have a clue, and
Yeah, like
suddenly
importing and shipping and tariff
you need
codes
to understand about all of this.
And when did the Arduino team form? Because now you're a business. So you have this Arduino name, and you have Gianluca manufacturing, you have Tom Igo doing stuff, you have David Mills doing stuff, you have other David doing stuff. When did you say we need to make a company because it's starting to become a business?
Yeah, I think the company came later on. At the beginning, you know, the money that was made by selling the boards wasn't really generating any real I mean, all the revenues was basically reinvested into making more boards.
Yeah.
So it was there was basically no, I mean, there was some cash that would pay for some traveling or some
Yeah.
other activity.
You have to invest in making more
And here's the
boards.
question. I don't know if you remember, but did you set out to do you ever think it was going to be a business, or are you just like, no, this is just stuff I'm doing with my students, and just like it's very good for me because I want to teach electronics?
We thought it was going to be an open source project, and I think personally I thought it was going to be mostly about. So I make this platform, and my job will be in the future mostly making projects. So this platform is essentially because a number of the early Arduino products are actually like the output of me and Gianluca also making consultancy projects. We used to do exhibition design at the Design Week in Milan. We used to work with some early clients.
So what's an Arduino that came out of that,
For example, the Arduino Ethernet shield came out because we made some kind of an Arduino Ethernet that was used in an exhibition when we needed to wire up 40 Arduinos to some computers with projectors doing like a multi-touch table long, 15-meter long table. So we needed to use the network to wire up all the Arduinos. Yeah. So the research, quote unquote, came out of that particular project. Or what became later on the Tinkerkit, which kind of separate from Arduino, but came out of us needing to be able to connect like dozens of sensors and not wanting to solder each sensor individually. So at the beginning we were using phone connectors because you can kind of wrap wire, you could crimp them, very easily. Yeah. But then we switched to the 3-pin thing, and so this was back in 2006.
Okay. So as we go through the history of Arduino, so we know why you made it, know how you made it, why you named it that way, some of the people involved. Do you remember what was the first time that you noticed that other people started making things for the Arduino? What was the first whoa, I had no idea, maybe it was a shield or maybe they wrote code. What was the first time you noticed that, hey, this is starting to take off a little bit, other people are doing things?
When we started Arduino, we realized we needed a distributor in the US, and that back then Adafruit wasn't around. I mean, you were making that thing at iBeam. You made that MIDI interface at iBeam.
Yeah, you had your Zoxbox and you had...
Zoxbox, so doing MiniPow, SpokePow.
But it was still so we were looking for people to distribute in the US, so we started working with SparkFun at the beginning.
There's SparkFun and then also Make. I remember trying...
Make,
It was hard because we had to figure out a way to wire money to Italy. And Dan Woods and I were running around. There was no such thing as a maker shed at the time. And I remember you had an Adafruit site. Yeah. And you started stocking Arduinos. But what was the first time you remember when someone made something else? Do you remember what the first shield was, Lamar? Was it a prototype?
Tom Igo made the first proto shield.
Maybe that was the first shield. But someone from anyone from the outside?
I remember that you took the original proto shield and made it much better.
Yeah.
Maybe that was the first one?
That was already...
One of the first ones was...
Annoying.
And she, that's why it's open hardware, no?
And then code. Because I noticed...
My proto shield is the most cloned proto shield. So it's the best.
So, do you remember, Lamar, the first library that you wrote for, or code or thing that you did?
I do remember that I had a consulting project that I did for the electric sheep thing, and I needed a microcontroller, and I was building basically Arduinos on breadboards. Not Arduinos, but I was using Megas and stuff, and I really liked that Mega series. I was using it for a bunch of projects. I think MIDI Sense and some other other earlier projects I was using it, and then I think I used it in Arduino NG, and I was like, oh, this is really cool. I want to carry this because it was this is so much easier than building it from scratch. Because I kept using my own FTDI breakout, and I kept doing the same thing over and over again. So it would be nice to have this all in one thing. So that was while I was still at iBeam. Right?
It was almost 10 years ago.
Yeah, it was 2006.
Yeah.
So, and then I was actually trying to get Arduinos in the store almost immediately afterwards. That was pretty early. I think Arduino is what is the product number? 65 or something?
Yeah.
66 or something?
Yeah, it was
product number 66.
It was one of your first 100 products.
Yeah, it's very early.
So after it started to become a little bit of a business, you said, okay, we can't ship from Europe. We have to find distributors.
Clearly, but also it became natural because people started to say, oh, can I resell your product because it's interesting? So at the beginning, it was mostly, the factory was shipping directly to people. So Arduino was essentially a group of people designing these products. And
they used to come in little green bags.
Yes,
Yeah.
before they were coming in nothing, and then they became green plastic bags.
Yeah.
And then it became green plastic bag with a sticker on
With
it
a
that
sticker on
said,
top.
this device is,
Yeah.
it's not. Essentially, there was like a disclaimer
Yeah.
saying, this thing is for your
Hobbyist,
entertainment, hobby use. If you put it into into a
Computer, it's not our problem.
or like a fake heart or whatever, like a
Medical
replacement heart for
device,
somebody.
Arduino.
That's it.
Yeah.
So in a way, that was the. So I think the first real sort of business that was Arduino was in 2008.
Okay. Not too long ago.
Yeah, then we started to register the trademark, because then we decided that the model was going to be that so we would just be the ones who design the products and maintain and support them, and other people would be doing the production, the manufacturing.
Yeah.
And
Not too much of a different model than open source itself. Like Red Hat has a trademark.
yeah.
You can do anything you want with Linux, but if you want to do stuff on your own, call it something else. There's similarities. Mozilla, Adafruit is like that. We have open hardware. Just don't call it Adafruit.
Yeah.
So
In
same
fact,
thing.
our first sort of trademark policy document was, inspired heavily by the Ubuntu trademark policy, which is essentially explaining this.
Yeah, you can.
If you want to use Ubuntu, you can, but
Yeah,
the
you can't
rules.
call it Ubuntu unless you're them.
Yeah.
That's pretty much. I think that's the only thing, because when people think about the history of open source hardware and Arduino and Adafruit and MakerBot and all these different companies, little bits. One of the things that seems to be core is the name is important, and we all don't think there's any way to protect the hardware itself. There's no laws. It's not like copyright.
Even if it wasn't open source hardware,
Yeah,
cloning an Arduino Uno wouldn't be that hard.
Yeah,
It's
there's
just
patents, there's trademarks, and there's copyrights. And hardware is that one where there's probably no protection. People argue on mailing lists all the time.
Actually, I realized that because early on, before there was even Arduino, I was actually asking one of the manufacturers in Ivrea to get, if it was possible to get a quote from a Chinese manufacturer about a circuit that I was making. I said, do I need to send them a bill of materials and schematic? No, we just
they
send
just
them
look
the
at it.
board and they look at it and that's
Yeah.
it. So I realized that, at a certain level of technology, it's so easy to just, to do it. So the technology itself was not important. Since Arduino comes out mostly out of interaction design schools, what we cared about was the user experience.
Yeah.
And sometimes, even though, for example, if you look at Apple and they've been around forever and people could copy what they do,
Yeah.
nobody is able to apply design and interaction design in a consistent and kind of...
It always looks a little off because you have to do the whole experience, not just the one, not just oh, I like this feature. There's two industries that I think are similar, and sometimes this comes up. So fashion, you can always you can always make the exact dress. You can always make the exact pants. Patterns, no protection. And also recipes, cooking. Very interesting. And when you think about it, this maker movement isn't like engineering and patents and going to court. It's more like cooking and fashion, where people are trying to make it better and more contemporary. But you really don't have any protection. It's all about the brands. Like, you can make a Prada dress exactly like a Prada dress, just don't call it Prada.
Yeah.
So very similar.
So the inspiration for me were mostly two things. One was this talk that was given by a professor from the University of California, where she was explaining about, how the design of a certain dress cannot be patented, or so you can only, the logo is what sort of the branding is what's valuable in fashion. So that model was interesting for me because it allowed open hardware and it allowed us to be able to say, but this is what we do.
Yeah.
And if somebody else wants to do it, great, but they don't call it with our name.
Yeah.
And the second thing was essentially the panini industry, which now I realize in the US you started to calling them paninis.
Yeah.
But
they're actually in every Starbucks now.
paninis.
Yeah.
So the question is that in Italy, obviously, there's like 1 million places making panini. So the same ham sandwich, everybody does it.
Yeah.
So that was one of the other ideas that came up. Everybody can make a ham sandwich, and suddenly some shops are selling a lot of them, and there's another shop makes a ham sandwich and doesn't sell any.
Yeah.
So it means that still within something which is completely open and public,
Yeah.
you can have your own way to do it, which makes it
You can do it better, you can do it cheaper, you can add more features.
Yeah,
Maybe
you
this one has
can,
pickles in it, who knows?
Maybe the waitress is really nice.
Well, in a way, but the way you pick the bread, the ham, and the
Yeah.
cheese and the salad makes a completely different.
Yeah.
result.
Okay, so here,
Arduino.
so
Okay.
so here we are. It's 10 years, and I just have a couple before we. There's a bunch of questions, but I want to get some more background so people can see where Arduino's been and where it
see
is.
some pictures.
Yeah. So here's some pictures. This is your site. I went in the Wayback Machine.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That is a classic Arduino.
This was your. This was your.
Forever.
This was your 2007.
Yeah.
Sorry, 2000. Yeah, 2007 site,
Mm-hmm.
and I also have the 2006. The Wayback Machine kind of has some of it, and then you guys did a site update in 2011, and it's a little off
10.
because of the Wayback Machine.
2010.
2010. You know, I grabbed it. I think you did it right after this last shot. Maybe Wayback Machine isn't exactly accurate.
It was September 2010.
I like
Okay.
how it jumped right from like serial port to like Uno.
And then recently, you debuted the new site,
Yeah.
and the new
Ooh.
site's very beautiful. So I did want to give you just a couple minutes to talk about the new site because it was a big change. You had forums in one place, and you had like buying stores. So what's happened recently with the website?
Well, I think what happens is that when you get a project going, also back then there was no GitHub. So what we
Yeah.
had to do, we pull up a wiki and we use that as a content management system.
Yeah.
Then we installed the same forum that processing was using
Yeah.
to get people to.
PHBBB, we all use it.
Oh, actually, it was even worse than it was. It was YAB, which is like a Perl-based forum.
Oh no.
Yes. Oh no. So we had that thing, and that was what we had as an infrastructure.
Yeah.
And then we were using a thing that was like SourceForge, but it was called Berlioz. It was a German
Oh
thing.
yeah, because
Yeah.
that's the more open source than SourceForge site.
Well, also because SourceForge was giving me some trouble. When I tried to register Arduino on SourceForge, there was something that they didn't like, so I forget about it.
And then also, I think you guys used Google Code for a while, but I think
Yeah.
now GitHub is kind of the
GitHub-
standard now. Yeah.
GitHub allows for faster sort of, you can incorporate contribution much faster.
Yeah.
But in a way, so what happened is that obviously everything grew kind of randomly. And so at some point in 2010, when we decided we wanted to do our own online store, in a way, we realized that we need to try to, first of all, had a much more recognizable branding. So it was time for us to, so I took one of my former students who's a great designer and interaction designer, Giorgio Olivero, and I forced him to design a logo for us and all the graphics. I was like, come on, you have to do it.
Yeah, it's very iconic. Like you can see, like it, and it's beautiful. It's one of the logos that you can spot it from a distance. You don't need the words.
Yeah.
It's universal. You don't have to speak English. You can see the plus minus and the
Yeah.
infinity. No, it's a nice logo. Very hard.
no.
Very hard to do.
It's hard to look
Yeah, no, I think Giorgio is an amazing designer, and it's obviously, the limitation is living in a country that has no appreciation for amazing people, which is Italy. And
You're allowed to say that because you're from Italy.
I'm allowed to say it because I'm Italian, and I know that. So the question is, so we started to incorporate some branding into the design of the board and everything. So Giorgio and Gianluca did a great amount of work of figuring out how to design beautiful graphics and from Illustrator and transfer them into
Yeah.
Gerber. So they create all these kind of workflows. So we can do like very elaborate graphics on the PCBs,
Yeah.
which makes it much easier to understand if you're buying a clone or not.
Yeah.
And so the branding, if you look at the graph of sales, you can see that the graph kind of goes up like this. And then when we introduce the new branding, you see like a big.
Wow.
Because
great.
people were looking specifically for those Arduinos.
Well, because then suddenly, it's much more appealing to a wider
Yeah.
audience because it's more beautiful to look at. And then suddenly it's much more recognizable. So the fake ones are, very easy to spot.
Yeah.
And then the next step was, so we built this thing called SSO, which is like a single sign-on to incorporate the username and password of all the different systems. But then we kept hammering all these pieces. So the new website is essentially the first step of a process to try to unify everything within Arduino so that there's not a forum separated from the
Yeah.
website from the store, but it's an organic piece where you can navigate and it's a little bit more, and also it's designed in a way to be a little bit more modern in terms of web technology on
Yeah.
the front end, so it actually loads a little bit faster than the old one.
Okay.
And there's a lot of some work now done to introduce new functionality that gets delivered through the store. So we're gonna have more languages soon.
Okay, great. Okay, and then before we're gonna do a round of questions. It'll be speed round. Lots of good questions.
Yep.
I wanted to just plug your book. So you have you have one of the best-selling books on microcontrollers. This is I used to be at Make, so I can say this. This is
Right.
everybody got this book. This was getting started with Arduino, and tell us about this book. Was it just your guide that you wanted to have out there for people to?
No, actually, what happened is that when I started teaching Arduino, obviously I needed some support material, so I started to gather some. I took a lot of the material I had at school and I put it in an open office document.
Yeah.
And I started to work on it like that. Then one summer, one of my former students, who's also an artist, Elisa, was doing a summer internship with us. So I said, well, why don't you draw the illustrations? I wanted the hand-drawn illustrations because I wanted them to look like a notebook, so they would be less frightening.
Instead of a schematic, maybe more like a sketch.
Yeah, and also instead of like pictures of like circuits, something that looks like hand-drawn, which is less dramatic, less kind of scary.
I really like these are charming.
Yeah.
These hand-drawn.
So she did also some funny. There's some funny illustrations of like Spock tweaking a circuit and that kind of stuff. And then what happened is that in 2008 I had the chance to go to Foo Camp.
Yeah.
So I showed up with this thing kind of printed on a piece of paper, and I met with Dan Woods and Dale Doherty, and I said, well, I have this.
Yeah.
Could we make an Arduino book? And they said, well, okay, seems like a good idea.
That sounds like Dale.
No, but it was a nice meeting.
Yeah.
But obviously for them it was kind of a leap, because at the moment it wasn't.
Yeah.
I also remember when I started working on the book, even some people within the team said, well, who would want a book about this thing?
Yeah, but it's one of the best-selling books. So I think it's up to second or third edition. And are you planning on doing another edition or updating it?
There's a third edition coming.
Okay. Was this breaking news on Ask an Engineer?
Now
No,
the pressure's on.
there's been some. We have to do some. We have to push the third edition.
Okay.
The plan is there. We have to start executing.
Okay. Well, for the folks who are tuning in, if you ever want to get a book, I think it's the best book for getting started with Arduino, exactly like the title says.
So in a way, this is the summary of also a lot of the things I learned as a child, because I learned electronics as a kid. So there are some things in there that are my experiences learning as a kid. So sometimes there are things that are not exactly 100%, accurate in terms of engineering or software engineering, but they are designed to be approachable by beginners.
That's right.
Okay, we're going to do some questions.
Good.
So everyone likes to talk about future products. What's the timing and pricing on the tray that came up in the questions?
If you can talk about it.
And what
Or
is
if
the
you don't know,
tray?
you can say
Yeah,
that.
so the tray is kind of like a BeagleBone and a Arduino in one.
Yeah, it's in one piece. Well, so the prices haven't been completely set yet, so
You don't have to answer that part. Do you know the timing of when it might
the
come out?
timing is so in 1/2 weeks, it will be available in a beta format on the Arduino web store.
Okay.
So instead of like when we did the Due, we gave away like 100 boards to people that pledged they were going to do some work on it, and like 3 people did any
That
work
happens
on
with us. People always say, "Oh, we want to do beta stuff," and we found that they don't.
I'm
just-
the beta tester.
Yeah.
I have to beta test in-house.
But a lot of the people, they just want something for their collection as a
Yeah.
gadget. So we stopped doing that. So we say, okay, now if you want, here's a board with the power supply, Wi-Fi, everything ready. You pay whatever will be the price that comes out, and then you buy it and you can do any work. And then if you do like a great contribution, we'll send you maybe the final version or something. So we will reward the people. So the people who do real contribution to the platform, they will basically get their money back in a way or another, I would say. I mean, I'm not able to promise exactly how we were going to do it, but
you could give them a store credit or something like that.
that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So the idea is that instead of giving away for free, so and then later on in I think at Maker Faire in May is when it's going to be available.
Okay, that's pretty close. A couple months from
that's
now.
soon.
That's big news. Okay, someone wants to know, have you ever thought about adding a debugging chip on the Arduino? Perhaps Arduino could push Atmel to publish documentation on their debug wire protocol.
So what's happening is, yes, we thought about it for a long time, and I remember going to Norway like 4 years ago in like under like minus.
It's cold. It's like you've got like skis. You're like skiing to Atmel,
Totally.
and there's
I
like
was-
dogs, and you're like mush.
I was skating on ice, basically going to the office. So I basically told them, open the protocol. I said, we can't do it. And I said, but we can give you a single chip debugger. And then, and now
It's been like 5 years. Like,
now
I'm sure
it's done. They are doing it.
They are.
Okay.
So
Okay,
it's-
this is more big news on the
So
show.
So
here.
Atmel
hopefully
is working
soon.
on it. They have already a single chip debugger that they deliver on their development kits.
Okay.
And so we're working on figuring out how to incorporate that into Arduino.
That'd be cool.
Okay.
And
All right, next up. Well, this question is hand in hand with the other one. So when you talk to Atmel, are they surprised that there's so many, that this took off? Because they've sold probably at least 1 million extra chips. That they didn't come
At
up with
least,
this.
probably 2 or
This
3
wasn't
million.
Arduino wasn't an Atmel project. It came up from someone else, right? You'd think.
I remember, so when the first time I tried to approach Atmel, it was really funny. It was 2005. I called their distributor, and then like they called me back like 2 weeks later,
Yeah.
asking me if I was the guy that was looking to buy Pentium processors, and I was like, no, I'm the guy that wants the AVR processors. Oh
Yeah.
wow, AVRs.
Why do you want that?
And then that was like weird. Then I sent an email to every single Atmel email address for years, and they
Wow.
didn't reply to me. And then suddenly one engineer from Norway emailed us like in 2009 or something saying,
Okay.
your stuff is really good, we like it, and we will send you some free Atmel gear.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
These guys, so we used him as a sort of,
That's how you got in. An
wedge.
engineer there, yeah. I remember each year at Make, I would search the Atmel site for the word Arduino. And 6 years ago, nothing. And then a few years ago, they added all sorts of Arduino stuff because it was a great way to introduce one of their chips. And then people start to look around for other type of Atmels.
I can understand that back in the days we were very, very, very niche.
Yeah.
So clearly, a big company can't really talk to everybody that comes in and says, I have a genius idea.
Yeah.
I would say the current Atmel management is very supportive and, helps.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that I've noticed is like Intel, they want to do something with Arduino. TI, they want to do something with Arduino. And like it's everybody who wants to do something in the maker space, they know that the best way is to probably do something that maybe works with the
Yeah.
Arduino IDE. They want to be part of that community, and
Yeah.
you built something special because they want to be big companies want to be part of it.
The issue is that we have as Arduino is the fact that we would like to work with everybody and every manufacturer, because the only thing is that we have this product line that we can't increase to like hundreds and hundreds of boards. So sometimes we have to turn down offers of collaboration because they think that it will make the product line so big and so complex that beginners or even people with like a little bit of experience, they wouldn't know what to buy. So in the end, we have to be selective and clearly, if we were a company that only thought about revenues, we would be working with every single person on the planet, but then it would dilute Arduino so much that the people we really care about would find it useless.
Gotcha.
I like how some companies, like the MSP430 guys, like they didn't clone Arduino, but they made their own like Launchpad, which is a separate thing.
It's
And it's
fine.
not compatible with Arduino. They don't say it is. It's their own
fine.
thing, but they use it as their own eval board
Yeah.
for chips. So like that group of people, they're like, oh, we want to show off all the different MSP430 designs,
Yeah,
and,
no,
and it's
no.
cool because it's like
Hey, I
there's
even
some
like-
people who are just like they're MSP430 people.
I like what TI did with BeagleBone. So they started the BeagleBone
Yeah.
group, and Jason's doing a great job with that. And it's a very unique product. And I like how you see BeagleBone, and then you see Arduino in the
Yeah.
tray. Very cool.
Well,
It's
also
cool. You
bec-
guys can get together and hate PC104 together.
Well, most of the idea is that we knew the people at BeagleBone and BeagleBoard group
Yeah.
for a while, so we wanted to do something together. So we figured out how do we combine the different things together. So I also, in a way, the whole Launchpad thing. At the end of the day, TI is doing they're not trying to exploit the
Yeah.
Arduino
No, I
brand.
think it's perfect because it's like they don't say it all, like they don't
So-
promise anything that they can't deliver. but they're like, this is a good idea,
So,
and it's powerful.
Yeah, I'm happy when people.
Great for the developer. I mean, it's for developers, not for beginners.
To me, the only thing that still surprised me after all these years is that at the end of the day, there are big companies that have lots and lots of money, and still they're sort of competing with Arduino by basically copying Arduino. And you think, you have billions of dollars of revenues, you have thousands of engineers. Why don't you compete by leaping ahead in terms of ease of use and functionality? And
There's still a lot of work to be done there. It's still complicated.
yeah, I know. That's what I have ideas that I would like to do that I cannot do, and and it will take me years to implement all of them. Also because the revenues we have are limited because we're not trying to exploit the brand too much.
Gotcha. Okay, so what's next for Arduino? People, a bunch of the questions that came up is, so the Trace coming out soon, there's the Galileo. Is there going to be an update to the Due? Is there going to be smaller Arduinos? Like what other Arduinos can people expect in the future, if you can talk a little bit about that?
So, well, I would say that there's a number of areas where, there are products that would benefit from the Arduino Touch. So like, for example, there's this whole talk about Internet of Things.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, for most of the people, it's still quite complicated.
The Yun is in that category,
The Yun
right?
is in that direction, yeah. It's something that's, it's easy to use in a way. You have the power of the OpenWRT Linux, but you don't really use Linux. You still are within the Arduino.
And Tembo is very powerful. That
With the Tembo libraries, we measured it on the Tembo website. People are building stuff 9 minutes after they register for Tembo. They have like an Arduino going to Facebook, doing things with Facebook in 9 minutes. I think
that's incredible.
And also Tembo, if you check out their website, they added all these code generators. So you can actually, by clicking on different forms.
It's just like if, then, this, that type
kind
thing.
of, yeah. And it generates Arduino code. You can cut and paste, and they even support the classic Arduinos, like the one with the Ethernet shield now.
Okay.
So they've done a pretty amazing, and so we like to work with people like Tembo, where we make it easier and easier for people to, we work with Telefonica, we made this GSM shield. The biggest thing was to actually make a SIM card which is specific for that thing, so that when you buy the shield, you put the SIM card, you go online, you fill a form, and boom, you've
got connectivity.
Working.
Yeah.
So
Internet of Things, that's something that we...
So there's a lot of work to be done there.
Okay.
There's a lot of work in making all the Linux-based devices more usable.
Okay.
So
Embedded
the
Linux.
Tray is coming out with this, to me, I think it's really beautiful. HTML5 development environment, which is served directly from the board. So a lot of the complexity of running Linux are all hidden away in a beautifully designed. So we worked again with Giorgio and his team on the graphic part, and we have this amazing interaction designer called Alice. Ciao, Alice Pintus, who has done an amazing job at kind of designing all the experience. So I think when it's going to come out, it's going to make the whole process of dealing with this kind of powerful Linux machine very, very.
It seems where that's the market's where it's going. It's like Linux something, but it's just very complicated.
I mean, I think you can. It's a market where you can either work at making the cost incredibly low, and then you let people build their own stuff around it, or you can work on making it incredibly easy.
Yeah.
And so people choose product depending on their skill levels and what they want to do.
Yeah. Right now, if I had to look at like ease of use, we've got BeagleBone, Raspberry Pi, Arduino. Arduino is the one that right now it seems easiest if you want to get someone started with something. Then later on, there's a lot of packages that you can put on like a Raspberry Pi, and then BeagleBone's the one that's a little bit complicated right now, but it's very powerful.
Yeah, but also in terms of user experience, they pioneered a number of things on the way you set up the board, which are quite, let's say, they came up with, like, this a network over USB connection. So you plug it in and you configure it. So some of that stuff is, something they came up with, and they really care about that particular aspect.
Okay, so we've got Internet of Things, making like Linux easier. Anything else on the Arduino horizon that folks can look forward to?
Well, more collaboration with Adafruit on wearables.
Okay, wearables.
Let's just just say this. Okay, we will have a separate.
We'll do a new show called Arduino Rumors, and it'll be like celebrity gossip.
Yeah, totally.
And,
Somebody should start doing that.
Yeah.
I totally saw an @xmega walk out of the Adafruit shop.
Yeah. But yeah, I personally think there's a combination of the two. I think we're going to see Internet of Things plus wearables. So all the personal body networking but you have to get it off and post it, publish it. And I think those two are gonna be combined. And I think that what's neat is in the wearable space, we've been doing a lot of stuff with Flora and Gemma. Getting people started with that who've never done electronics is getting easier and better. Getting things to light up, NeoPixels, all that. I think we're going to see people, kind of like you were saying, maybe it takes them only 9 minutes to have a Arduino interact with Facebook. It might take someone only 10 minutes to make a shirt that lights up. You know, all these things.
So some of the stuff I've been working for quite a long time now is all these ideas about trying to make electronics which is not anymore based on one single massive processor, but maybe working at having like a network of smaller processor that collaborate together. So this idea that all the different pieces that you snap together, they should be intelligent in their own right. So you would be able to create circuits by sort of putting together little patterns of circuits, and you can make them.
And they're aware of each other.
Yeah, and they basically they have some kind of a communication between them.
Yeah.
So in a way, it's less obvious from an electronics engineer point of view, which tends to obviously optimize everything into the least amount
One big
of parts.
core,
Okay.
and it's like the DMA and the interrupts, everything's working.
But in certain markets, certain type of problems, what you want is to get people up and running really, really fast and reduce the amount of time they have to do looking for documentation and all of that. So you just, trying to build electronics in a more modular way by exploiting the fact that you get very, very nice processors that cost.
Okay. There's two last questions.
Okay.
This hour went by fast. The
Okay.
next question is, someone wanted to know, how does it feel to change the world? So from their point of view, they said, I've learned everything about electronics, and this person they said they started a new career. All because of our Arduino. I don't know how old they are. They could be 14 or something. How does it feel to actually change?
I'm 12 years old.
How does it feel to change the world?
wearables.
You made something that didn't exist that got electronics in the hands of more people than ever before. So how do you feel about that?
So I think, I'm still getting my head around this, so I haven't really fully understood the impact. I also think that I have to say that we built upon layers of open source that existed there, so it's not just us. We just put together a bunch of things done by really, really cool people around the world. So without AVR GCC, without the work that Hernando did on wiring, without the work that processing did, without the work I did before. So without all the contribution, we couldn't be in the place where we are. So I feel that I share this thing with a lot of people.
Yeah, Arduino to me is like a celebration of so many open things that came together.
Yeah, it's a mashup of different cool technologies that were individually really cool but complex to use, and we try to kind of put them together and package them up.
So this video is recorded on YouTube. It's going to be there forever. What do you think, this is the last question of the night, what do you think Arduino is going to be in 10 years? Can you even imagine what an Arduino will be 10 years from now?
That's a tough question.
It's a really tough question.
Nobody knows yet. You can say anything.
Well, I think what's happening in Arduino at regular intervals of time is that you need to scale to a next level. So in each jump, it's not obvious. And so some of the things that are embedded in what we were 10 years ago and 5 years ago and 3 years ago, they carry over in the next step. So, it's going to be an interesting challenge to see where we are in 10 years. Also trying to balance the kind of need to get revenues in order to keep the system going, and the need to be kind of faithful.
There's the Arduino project, and then there's the Arduino business.
But the Arduino project is basically mostly pushed by the Arduino business. Because, people like to reuse the work that we do, but nobody builds a better idea and just gives it away for free.
So I think in 10 years, this is my prediction, because now we'll see if I'm right 10 years from now. When we have you on Ask an Engineer, the hologram edition. I think in 10 years from now, we'll probably see something called Arduino or something just like the Arduino that's very easy to use, and it'll be something that you fully print out. It'll be something that maybe works with bio. But I think it's going to be the same approach, and it's not going to just be from engineers for engineers. I think it's too late to go back. Good design matters for phones. Good design matters now for people who do electronics. Good design matters for people who are teaching it. And so I think it's too late to go back. I think it's not going to get worse. It's going to get easier and better and even lower cost. So that's what I think.
We'll
see.
Hopefully,
Okay, well, Massimo, thank you so much for being on
thank you.
this special
Arduino
edition of
Day.
Ask an
Thank
Engineer.
you, guys.
And
2014.
well, thank you. And like I said, you certainly changed our lives.
I'm
And
glad.
yeah, and I can't wait to see what we're all up to 10 years from now.
Yeah,
hope-
let's we will be here.
We'll be
Yeah.
here in 10 years.
10 years.
Yeah, we might be
promise.
we might be extending our lease 10 years, so we actually might be here 10 years
We
from
might
now.
be in this location 10
Okay.
years.
Yeah. So, all right. So,
Thank you.
more information is on Arduino.cc, and everyone enjoy your Arduino Day for the remaining few hours. The code is Arduino Day on Adafruit.com. 10% off everything in the Adafruit store. And Massimo, Arduino team, everyone out there, thank you so much for bringing this thing into the world
Okay.
and making electronics more approachable.
Big hug.
Big hug. Okay.
Arduino, yay!
Okay. Goodbye, everybody.
Ciao, ciao.